Hey everyone, welcome to the Fourth and Long podcast presented by TJ 101 Sports. My name is Daniel Calvo. Joining me are Aaron Sviderman and Lauren Phillips. On Fourth and Long, we will be tackling some of the hottest NFL topics. The NFL season is moving fast, and we're here to help you keep up. Let's start with our first topic. Are the Chiefs or Rams the best team in the NFL? Aaron, we'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. The Rams are riding a lot of momentum right now, but I've got to go with the Chiefs. I think it goes into their matchup this week. The Chiefs and Pat Mahomes faced off against the toughest defense in the NFL, and they managed to come out with a win. Do I think the Chiefs are going to blow out every team? No. They'll encounter defenses of the caliber of the Rams, just like they did with the Jaguars, and they'll struggle. Pat Mahomes turned over the ball. He hadn't done that in previous games. The Chiefs will certainly have challenges ahead of them, but as they showed against the Jags, their offense is so strong that they can compensate for their weaknesses on defense. The Rams, Todd Gurley is strong. Todd Gurley can carry that team fairly far, and Jared Goff on a good night can carry that team very far as well. That's a team like they're certainly in the conversation, but when Jared Goff's not on, they're not making those big plays, or they're relying too hard on Todd Gurley to make those big plays. And with the Chiefs, their defensive struggles now have a lot to do with injuries. Eric Berry, for instance, I don't think he's featured once this season at 100%. He's been out there, but he hasn't been his full self yet. And Eric Berry, obviously, one of the best safeties in the league. So I think it'll be a lot like Steeler games, a lot of very high scoring shootouts. But I think the Chiefs' offense is just I can't think of a defense that can stop them. If the Jaguars can't, I don't think the Bears can. I don't see any defense being able to beat that offense. And while the Chiefs' defense sure leaves a lot to be desired, I think whatever other teams' offenses can do on the Chiefs' defense, the Chiefs can do that and more on their defense. Pat Mahomes is just too good right now.
Lauren,
listen, the Chiefs have shot out of the gate at a rate I did not expect, and I don't think the majority of the country expected. My motto is, whenever in doubt, take a look at the numbers. And if you take a look at the numbers for the Los Angeles Rams, they're the top offense in the league right now and have been consistently so. If we just compare the numbers, the Los Angeles Rams are garnering on average about 470 yards a game. The Chiefs are notching about 413. So the Rams are ahead by a good amount, but again, we're talking about 40 yards here. It's really not that much. It's the defensive end of the ball that I think the Rams far and away blow the Chiefs out of the water. The Rams are working with the 9th ranked defense in the league, allowing on average 341. So if they're only allowing 341 yards and they're putting away 470, they have a solid upper hand on the majority of the teams. Kansas City Chiefs, on the other hand, have the worst ranked defense in the NFL. Defense does not always win you championships, but they will absolutely lose you them, especially if we're talking about 461 yards allowed by the Chiefs. If the Chiefs are allowing 461 yards by mediocre teams, imagine what the Rams would do to them when they're scoring 468 yards against some of the better teams in the league. Yes, the Chiefs have more weapons than the Rams. I would say that they do offensively. They do not defensively. However, I think that the Rams are not contingent upon the continued success and efficiency of Patrick Mahomes, a young quarterback with a head coach that will inevitably, week by week, put more and more on his shoulders to bear. Jared Goff is a great game manager. He's a phenomenal system quarterback in a great system with one of the best backs in the league behind him being Todd Gurley and several key receivers. And on the defensive ball, Aaron Donald. I think the Rams far and away take the argument.
Yeah, they certainly have two quarterbacks that are young, and they're both, they both can put up numbers. So it'll be interesting to see, which of them could keep it up. But let's move on to a team with a less than desirable start, the New England Patriots. Should the New England Patriots
Here's
still
the
be
thing
labeled
with
as
the New England
contenders?
Patriots.
Lauren, what's your take on that?
You don't put the toe sticker on them until it's over and away and Tom Brady's cleaning out his locker. I think, if anything, the Patriots have earned everyone's boos, and they've also earned our respect. Bill Belichick is the best head coach the NFL has ever seen. Tom Brady is the best quarterback to ever play. Not the most talented, but he is the best to ever do it. When you have that head coach and quarterback combination in the NFL in a division that is still very much wide open, the Miami Dolphins by no means have that division on lock. The Patriots are not only the top contenders in their division, but the way the Steelers look right now, the constant fluctuation in the AFC, I don't know if the Patriots could beat the Chiefs. But the question is, are they contenders? Absolutely. As long as Bill Belichick is the coach of the Patriots and Tom Brady is the starting quarterback, you can't rule them out. We now have Edelman back. They have the new acquisition of Josh Gordon. Sony Michel has been performing at a decently high rate, given that he's a Patriots running back. I think the Patriots are absolutely contenders. I think anyone that rules them out is ruling them out prematurely and is negating something that the Patriots have proven to us over and over again, that they will find a path to victory. Do they beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship? I don't know. Do they make it to the Super Bowl? I don't know. Are they contenders? Absolutely, especially in the year when so many of the NFL's top dogs are falling off their pedestals.
I don't think the Patriots are ever completely out of the conversation, but looking at their past history, I think if there's any year where they're highly vulnerable and certainly far from being a lock for the AFC Championship, let alone the Super Bowl, it would be this year. Tom Brady is the greatest to play the position. That's fairly evident. But he's not getting any younger. And yeah, he's been able to fight off age in a way that most quarterbacks have not been able to. He's still not young, and age is still a factor that needs to be considered. People are very quick to dismiss that when he has a good performance, but he's in a sport where you need to be durable, you need to be able to take a lot of hits, and he's 41 years old. He's gonna, like, at best, the offensive line holds up great, but I don't even think that's where their issues really are. I think it's with their defense. Like the game against the Colts, very telling. They gave up three touchdowns to tight ends down the middle, one to Swope and two to Eric Ebron. Like, they've had a lot of holes in their secondary. They've had a lot of departures. Malcolm Butler left. He was still a really quality shutdown corner. They don't have the defensive turnovers to compensate for the increasing number of offensive turnovers. Brady's threw 12 touchdowns, but he's thrown 6 interceptions so far. The defense is not proving to be able to keep up with the offense. Brady is great, of course, but he can still only do so much. The defense needs to go out and perform as well, and they're giving up points and they're giving up yards, not only in ways that they really haven't in years past, but like the way they give up the yards, the way receivers are being found open for touchdowns against the Patriots is different than how the Patriots have been in the past. The Patriots were good on both sides of the ball for so long, and that's how they were able to have the success that they do. But they're not able to stop opposing offenses in the way that they used to. And the question is really, is Tom Brady able to keep up? And with the offensive weaknesses there, with Tom Brady getting older, yes, you have the addition of Josh Gordon. You have Julian Edelman coming back. Gronk is still healthy, I guess. He's never fully healthy, it seems, but he's healthy enough to play. It really does seem like this is one of the last years in which they'll be solid contenders. But the way that their defense is shaping out, it looks like their offense will remain as strong as ever, but I just don't see their defense keeping the pace.
It's interesting because
losing in a lot of high scoring.
You started out by saying you don't think they're contenders, and more so because of their defense than their offense. Their defense is ranked 16th in the league. And if the Chiefs are going to be contenders with the worst ranked defense in the league, I think that the Patriots, who are ranked 16th and allowing 366 yards a game, get some kind of slack there for the defensive performance thus far. They've had injuries. They've had personnel changes. They've lost their defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, who's now the head coach over in Detroit. But the 16th ranked defense in the league by no means, I think, disqualifies an offense run by Tom Brady and commanded by Bill Belichick. It disqualifies them from becoming contenders. I'm not saying they're a surefire Super Bowl contender. I'm not saying that they absolutely take the AFC or that they're leading the AFC, but they are absolutely contenders this year to win their division, to go into the AFC playoffs, and I think they are a contender to make it to the AFC Championship. Can they beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship? I think becomes the real question. That is yet to be determined, but I am not ready after just 5 weeks of football to say that they are not.
I think they'll make the playoffs. If the question is, will the Patriots make the playoffs? I think they will. What stands out to me, to a point you addressed, with their defenses, they've struggled, as I mentioned, but they've also done so against weaker opposition. They lost to the Jaguars, where the Chiefs, as mentioned before, the Chiefs won. The other teams they've played include the Texans, who've kind of been rebounding, but they played them in week 1 when the Texans weren't doing so well. They won, but not without giving 3 turnovers up on offense. Then after the Jags, they played the Lions, not the hardest team, then the Dolphins, and then this week the Colts. A big test will be Kansas City this week. It'll be kind of the preview for what many believe to be the AFC Championship. But it should be noted that the Patriots offense has not played a game yet this season with 0 turnovers. They've turned the ball over in every game they've played so far this season. And we're far enough in for that to be a problem, especially given the Patriots' past record of efficiency with the ball, not turning it over. They've been sloppier, especially at this point in the season. It's not far into the season, but it's far enough in where any rustiness from the first 2 weeks should have been resolved. That's how the past Patriots were. But they're not showing much signs of improvement. In fact, they've turned the ball over more in these last 2 games than they did in weeks 2 and 3.
Now, I know Tom Brady is a year older, and in your 40s, every year, I mean, to someone in their 20s is like 3 or 4 years. But I think that the argument that they haven't been able to rebound from a place that they are in now is inaccurate, because I think they did it last year. And last year, I mean, I think they were working with a weaker roster than they currently have now, with Josh Gordon active. Again, that is with him active. If the prompt is, are they contenders? I think it's absolutely. I think that you are correct in saying that the litmus test here is really how they perform against the Chiefs. But if the prompt is, are they contenders? I say absolutely. They're not the top contenders, though. I think you're correct.
I think you guys make both great points, but the truth is that as long as the Patriots have a hold of that division, they're going to always make the playoffs. The question is, can they win the Super Bowl? And I think that's something we'll find out as the season season goes on, and we'll really find out if they really are the contenders. But as long as they have that division, they can go to the playoffs. So we move on to our next question. The Patriots may or may not be making the playoffs, but what about Cincinnati? Can the Bengals steal the AFC North? Aaron, we'll start with you.
No. Absolutely not. No. Is part of that my slight bias as a Steeler fan or native Pittsburgher? Yes, I'll admit that. But by that same token, I know the Bengals. We play them 2 games a season, every season. Sometimes we see them in the playoffs. I know this team. The Bengals often have gotten off to very encouraging starts to their seasons. They'll often have a very high-flying offense. They've also had a lot of pretty easy schedules to start off the season. The big thing, though, is I don't see much in the way of like tangible changes that they've made between this season and last season, when they obviously did not get much done. They have the same quarterback. They have the same basic receiving core. They haven't really made much changes. The biggest difference for them is Fontes Burfict missed the beginning of the season because of his PED suspension. They've maybe I'm going a bit hard on their past history, but they're not a team that has ever been able to reach success in the regular season and sustain it until the end. Have they ever even won the AFC North? They're riding a lot of momentum right now, and they're also benefiting a lot from the misfortune of their rivals. The Steelers, my beloved Steelers, have not been playing the way that's usually expected of them. It's a whole other issue with regards to the Steelers this season and what problems are there. But the Steelers can absolutely, with an offense like they do and with a defense that's getting players back from injury and that's improving, they're at the very least going to be a hard block for the Bengals to get in. The Bengals also have a history of losing their cool and not keeping their composure against the Steelers. There's the notorious Bengals-Steelers game where they had the win in the bag, but Vontaze Burfict and then Pac-Man Jones with personal fouls put the Steelers right in field goal range, and the Steelers kicked it. That wasn't because the Steelers were the better team than the Bengals, and that the Steelers won because of that. That was the Bengals game. They won that game, except they didn't because they didn't keep their composure. And that's a constant theme, especially against not just the Steelers, but against rivals in the AFC North. Not to mention that one of their big offensive stars, Tyler Eifert, he's not coming back this season. He's done. He's broke his ankle. Gio Bernard, Joe Mixon, if they can both stay healthy, they'll have a decent chance. Tyler Boyd's been impressive, but they haven't made enough changes that tell me that they're a different team and that they're a team, especially with their coaching. They should have had a new head coach 5 years ago. It just doesn't work when you have Marvin Lewis for a decade and he never gets results. But if he's not getting you results in better times, he's certainly not going to do it now. And the Bengals roster just is not. They're riding momentum right now, but they're in a hard division. They have hard games to come, and they don't have the full personnel to last until the end of the season as legitimate
contenders. Can the Bengals steal the AFC North?
Let alone the top seed in the AFC North.
Yes. Is it likely? I would say no. I think that, again, I have a hard time slapping the toe sticker on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers, by far and away, have a better offense than the Bengals. I mean, A.J. Green can't seal a division for the Bengals alone. The Steelers just have so many more offensive weapons than the Bengals do. The thing that makes me say, even without Le'Veon, yeah, absolutely. I mean, James Conner has done a phenomenal job stepping up as the running back over in Pittsburgh. I think the thing that makes me
even without Le'Veon
hesitant is the Steelers' clear locker room problem, maybe starting with a mishandling of the team from Mike Tomlin, Ben Roethlisberger's tendency to be up and down. When the Ravens can beat the Steelers 26-14, and I know the Ravens are having a good season for them, but when the Ravens can beat the Steelers 26-14 and they can tie with the Browns, a Browns team without Baker Mayfield, it makes me hesitant to say that the Bengals cannot steal the AFC North. So yes, they can steal it. Is it likely? I would say no, it is not likely. I actually think that the Browns have a better chance at taking the division from the Steelers than the Bengals do. And I will stand by that. I know Daniel's laughing at me. I will stand by that. I think the Browns have a better shot than the Bengals do at this point. Andy Dalton is more hot and cold than Ben Roethlisberger is. I don't know. I have a hard time saying that they can't, but I'm going to go ahead and agree with Aaron that it will likely not happen and that the Steelers are by far the front runners. I think that the Bengals teeter between second and third, but they could do it. I mean, with the way Pittsburgh Steelers going thus far, they could do it.
Thank you, by the way, for bringing up that not at all painful loss to the Ravens. Definitely didn't hit his first, but I think with You mentioned an important point worth addressing: the Steelers' locker room problems. I think that was a beginning of the season issue. A lot of it dealt with the uncertainty around Le'Veon and the uncertainty around whether Connor would be a sufficient replacement. Connor has not only proved his value, but Le'Veon is set to come back after the Steelers' bye in Week 7. We have more stability. We're riding the momentum of a win at home. So I shouldn't say we, the Steelers. But the Steelers have all of the pieces they need and are seemingly past the parts of their internal drama that have led them to poor results. It's never a non-drama situation with the Steelers. When you have Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell on your team, you're going to have some drama, but not in the same way. As a fan, I was concerned last game because it took a good while for Antonio Brown to get his touchdown, and I was like, "Is AB about to knock over a Gatorade cooler again because he didn't get the ball?"
But that's part of the problem with Pittsburgh is that as you know, for you as a Steelers fan, and imagine what it's like for the coaches and the other personnel on the sideline. If your star wide receiver takes a quarter or two to score a touchdown, you have to, send a security guard to remove the Gatorade, the Gatorade water cooler. Like that is a problem. I mean, and I don't think that it's just the beginning of the season. Antonio Brown, in an unannounced fashion, missed a practice, I think week 2 or week 3. Last year, he's Facebook living the locker room. And then you also have Ben Roethlisberger, who's hot and cold about if he's going to retire last season. And then after the Steelers draft Oklahoma State Cowboys quarterback Mason Rudolph, makes a comment that he didn't think that was a wise draft pick. I think that you in Pittsburgh, there is a culture that breeds insubordination. I think it's a culture that almost says inadvertently that it is okay and it is allowed for players to express an opinion to the media, to the press, and social media that should not be. That should be, at most expressed to the coaches in their private office and at least kept to yourself. I think that this drama in Pittsburgh is going to continue. Some disagree with the point, but I think it's true. They say never let the wide receiver be the nucleus of a team because all they care about is their money and their stats. Ben Roethlisberger is no longer the captain of that offense. He hasn't been for a while. I think that creates a lot of problems for Pittsburgh. Does that negate all of the weapons that they have and their ability to score the ball and their defense's ability to sometimes cause turnovers? Because sometimes they do. No, it doesn't, but it puts a huge asterisk mark next to them. And when you have a culture in Cleveland that's improving, it's running off momentum, the Browns become a problem, especially when their defense is better matched with their offense, unlike Pittsburgh. Cincinnati, yes, they're running off momentum. Yes, they've played easier teams. Can they continue that? Cincinnati's ability to take the division, I think, along with Cleveland's, hinges upon Pittsburgh not being able to figure out their locker room problem and not being able to find a solution, A, on defense, and then B, in offensive consistency.
Well, you mentioned culture, and it's worth noting that it's not that Pittsburgh has a culture of insubordination. That's not something that's been long-standing. You look at any Bill Cowher, Chuck Noll team, you don't see that. It's a coaching issue. It's an issue we have ongoing with Mike Tomlin, where he's a player's coach at the cost of being a proper motivational coach. He wants to be their buddies, which is good. That's a good thing for a coach to have, but you can't just have that. You need to be able to bust their balls every now and then too. Tomlin doesn't really seem to show that, but it's still not a culture issue. The Steelers' culture is, if anything, winning. As a fan base, we, regardless of how delusional you think it is, we generally expect to win the Super Bowl every year, especially with this team we have now. And in years past, or before Le'Veon's holdout, we had the best running back, the best wide receiver, and a 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback who, yes, was aging, but was still there. Outside issues have been the reason for the Steelers' failed success in the postseason, but I don't think that's a knock on their regular season chances. The Steelers are a team of patterns. It's easy to predict as a fan. We play under when we're playing teams worse than us. We exceed our expectations when playing teams that are expected to beat us, and it all comes crumbling down in the postseason because we get too overconfident. And so that's a whole separate issue. But I think for this season, as it pertains to the AFC North standings, I think the Steelers will end the season firmly at the top, and I think the Ravens could probably unseat the Bengals too. I don't even see the Bengals as a lock for second in the AFC North.
I want to give you the last word on this because you are a Steelers fan, and the AFC North is the division you follow most closely. But in the name of clarification, a culture that expects to win Super Bowls is different than a culture that produces Super Bowls. And I do not like comparing the Steelers fan base to the Cowboys fan base, but the Cowboys fan base has a culture that expects a Super Bowl every year, and they have not won one in decades. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they may have a culture that expects to win, but the fact is that they haven't won it in 9 years, and they have had some of the most talented rosters the NFL has seen, like you pointed out. So while that there is a culture, maybe with the fans, I think that there is absolutely a culture, and yes, it is recent, and no, it is not longstanding, but there is a culture with Mike Tomlin, especially after that 2009 season, where insubordination is allowed. And if it is allowed, it is not a stretch to say that it is encouraged.
It certainly wouldn't be encouraged. Tomlin just isn't the kind of coach to really give it to his players in a way that he should be. I'm not coming to Tomlin's defense here. I just think that the postseason and the regular season are two very different animals when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And regardless of the Steelers' internal strife, and regardless of those kinds of issues, we generally manage to utilize our talent on the field, at least for the regular season. In the postseason, it's because we have overconfidence issues. We get too confident. Last season was the prime example of Steelers players saying on social media, we're going to go to Foxborough, we're going to kick their ass, and we're going to make it to the Super Bowl again. They didn't even get past the Jaguars in the first round. They got knocked out at home by Blake Bortles. We're a different team now in the postseason, and that's an area where Tomlin has created a culture. During the regular season, the Steelers will find ways to get it done in spite of that. The postseason is where we find issues. But I think in relation to the original question, it doesn't matter how the Steelers will do in the postseason, because the question was about the Bengals, and I don't think the Steelers will allow the Bengals to finish that division on top. At best, they're looking at second place. The Steelers are also an emotional team, but when they play division rivals, generally, and I mean, you can look at the Ravens as contradicting evidence, generally, the Steelers want to rise to the occasion. I think we got too confident against the Ravens at home, and I think by the time we realized, they're a much better team than we thought they were already up by an insurmountable lead. It was just the worst I've seen the Steelers play in a long time, that game against the Ravens. But there's something different about the Bengals games. I think the Ravens will be able to beat the Bengals too when they face off later in the season. And I also don't see the Bengals being able to sustain this. I think as it pertains to them, it's more about the Bengals' consistent historic inability to maintain momentum. And talking about culture, Marvin Lewis has been in Cincinnati way longer, way longer than he ever should have been, but he's still there. And so it needs to be addressed. And Marvin Lewis cannot get it done in the postseason. He cannot. He has proven this year after year after year after year. The Bengals are riding a hot hand right now. I just don't think they'll be able to sustain this. I don't think that they'll be at the top of the division come the end of the season. If they make it through the playoffs, it's through the wild card.
It's about time.
Just want to give out some facts to you guys about the Bengals. The last time they won the AFC North was 2015. And the last playoff victory was 1990.
Yep.
I wasn't even born yet. And I have another one. The Bengals have already beaten the Ravens already at Cincinnati. That was week 2.
But they'll face off. I remember that game.
Yeah.
I remember that game. They'll face off again, though, because division.
Yeah, and then this week they will be playing the Pittsburgh Steelers at Cincinnati. So that's going to be a game that we're going to have to watch out for because
that's going to be
Pittsburgh can take
war.
That's going to be a big one for injuries too, because as any fan of either of these two teams know, and even a casual fan not of either of those two teams who've just seen these matches, the Bengals and the Steelers, it's not just a rivalry. It's not just Steelers versus Ravens. It is. And it's not even just war. It literally, like, they're trying to injure each other. People will say it's a war in the NFL all the time. I cannot think of a rivalry in the NFL that exists right now that is as angry and as mean-spirited and as just, take your opponent out of the game as the Steelers versus Bengals. There are rivalries that are more competitive. There are rivalries that have more on the line. But in terms of sheer anger, how much one team hates another team and the extent to which they'll go to take out their anger, I can't think of another rivalry in the NFL that even comes close.
Do Raiders fans and John Gruden not count?
I don't think they're good enough to be rivals with anybody else right now.
No, I mean the Raiders versus John Gruden.
Oh, it's hard to read because the Raiders fans do love their Chucky. But he hasn't. What is his contract again? $100 million or something like that.
$100 million, 10 years.
Yeah, he's not exactly justifying his pay right now. But I think there's enough nostalgia there with success under John Gruden that he's safe in terms of job security for now at least.
It is Oakland.
Yeah, he'll have to screw up for a couple seasons for them to turn on him fully.
The Bengals definitely have a lot of challenge because after they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have to play the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh.
So, I mean, the Bengals are about to be tested in a big way very soon.
And they haven't had matchups as hard as their next two the entire season. I mean, maybe the Panthers, but they lost to the Panthers. I would say the Panthers were the better team I would certainly say the Panthers are better than the Ravens. And they lost the Ravens. They beat the Ravens, but they lost to the Panthers. That's their loss in the season. And they had 4 offensive turnovers against the Panthers. The Steelers underplay against weaker opposition. The Bengals kind of play expectantly. When they play a team that's better than them, they lose soundly.
That's a dangerous game to play, though, in the NFL. To play down to your opponents. That's a dangerous game to play, especially in that division.
It is. As a Steelers fan, I know it's a dangerous game that often does not pay off. We thought the Jaguars were the weaker team last season in the playoffs. We didn't get to the AFC Championship because of it. But the Bengals are they've had too easy of a schedule, and the opponents to come are just going to be too much for them.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. This is our 4th question. What should fantasy owners do with Leonard Fournette, giving Jamal Charles recent signing to the Jaguars? What should fantasy owners do? Lauren, your take first.
So you're not going to drop Fournette. That's the obvious. Can you trade Fournette? I mean, it depends what you're getting, and that depends what your current fantasy roster looks like. If you have an apparent need, and let's say you have a standout wide receiver and your wide receiver 2 is really lacking, and you have some other running back depth. And again, this is all subjective because each roster is kind of fine-tunedly put together, as is each fantasy trade. I think that fantasy owners at this point, depending upon what you can get, need to start considering trading Fournette. again, dependent upon what their roster needs. I think Yeldon is a phenomenal waiver wire pickup if he is still on your fantasy league's waiver wire. In a lot of leagues, he is already owned. Jamal Charles, I wouldn't pick him up off a waiver wire by any means. However, in football, right, in the real games, I think he's there to provide relief for Yeldon. I don't think that he will, in a major way, affect any of the Jaguars' games, although I do think it is somewhat of a safe and smart acquisition by Jacksonville. I think he's there to provide relief for Yeldon. I think the biggest hurt to Fournette's fantasy points is not Yeldon or Charles, though. It is Fournette in his health status. For me, you don't drop Fournette. You consider trading him at this point, but there's also nothing wrong with keeping him on your bench until he's healthy and putting him in there. Once he is healthy, how much does Yeldon and Charles affect his fantasy production? Well, what is healthy for Fournette? I think that's the big question. I don't think the recent signing of Jamal Charles to the Jaguars greatly affects Fournette's fantasy production. I think that Yeldon's ability to maintain a run game for Jacksonville does. But again, I think that Fournette's own health poses a bigger risk to his lack of fantasy production than Yeldon's presence on the team, and especially Charles' presence on the team. So at the end of the day, what should fantasy owners do with Leonard Fournette? Given the recent acquisitions, check out your roster, see what you need. If someone offers a good trade, maybe take it. You're definitely not dropping him. But there's nothing wrong with keeping him on your bench. If he can heal up and get ready for this season, I mean, he's up there with the likes of Kamara, Melvin Gordon, and Todd Gurley. So it's kind of a case-to-case basis there. I think as far as what fantasy owners should do.
And I am one of those owners. I have Leonard Fournette on my team. And he has been, as for anyone who's listening who is a Fournette owner, he's been pretty infuriating, especially in week 4 when he even tweeted like, hey, I'm looking forward to getting back out there. He was forced to take it down, but I mean, it was still out there. The Jags were pretty much gung-ho on like, yeah, we have Leonard back. And he feels hamstring tightening and leaves the game before the second half starts. I would count myself among the lucky few who are able to get Yeldon off the waivers. I don't know if there are any leagues where Yeldon is available at this point. You got to be playing in like a 16 league or something. I agree fully that Jamal Charles is not at all a fantasy pickup unless you're in a super deep league and you really need a flex. Even though there's probably better options. Jamal Charles' biggest role is going to be taking points from Yeldon and Fournette. And him serving as more of a spoiler. I think with Fournette, what you do with him if you're an owner of him, what I did was pick up TJ Yeldon immediately. But if you have him and TJ Yeldon's not an option, you either make a trade offer with someone that gives you somebody who's going to perform equally well while not denying you depth and key performers in very specific positions. If you are looking to trade Fournette, you need to have the running back depth to compensate, or you better be getting somebody good in return, which is hard right now because with Fournette injured, you lose a lot of leverage being the owner who's looking to trade him. You have to accept that you're going to get a lower tier running back in the short term to give you points at the sacrifice of the points that Leonard Fournette will deliver in the longer term when he comes back from his injury. I personally would say sit him and try to make do until he comes back. I would also say even if he's listed as a questionable, don't start him unless you like really need him to and are willing to take that chance. Because as been shown, he hasn't played a full game yet this season. In the 2 games he has played in, he got removed before the end of the first half. He personally, for me, I'm not starting him until he's fully healthy, like not even questionable designation, full health. I'm not starting him until he's there. But with regard to Jamal Charles, I don't think he's going to be a valuable fantasy player. I think he's only going to be a pain in the ass to owners of Yeldon and then eventually Fournette. And even when Fournette comes back, I think Yeldon will take the role that Jamal Charles is going to be taking now. And I don't think Jamal Charles is going to stay in Jacksonville after this season. I think this is merely a temporary remedy. And once Fournette is back to full health, it'll be same as before with Fournette carrying the majority of them, Yeldon coming in occasionally.
Well, my advice is very simple. Pick up Jamal Charles because I did. As soon as I found out that he got signed, I picked him up because the running back position for me is kind of weak. Mm-hmm. And my only, I guess, not even anymore, my running back number one was actually Jordan Howard. And that's not working out anymore because Tariq Cohen actually took his spot. So I had to pick up Jamal Charles. So if you are really desperate for running back and you need some production, I would suggest get Charles because Leonard Fournette, he will be missing this upcoming game. So, and then who knows how long he's going to be out. I think this is his second straight week out already, right? Yeah, so this is 2 games in a row that he's been out. So that's not a good sign. Maybe the injury is more serious than we think it is. He's trade value. You're going to have to test the waters with that in your league.
You're likely going to have to accept less because his injury status just kills leverage. But yeah, also Fournette, after he left week 4, he was ruled definitively out of playing for weeks 5 and 6. So there's not even a slim chance he'll be playing week 6. Week 7 is a maybe. I personally think he'll see limited action in a return for week 8 and then be back to full workload by week 9 if he doesn't re-aggravate the hamstring injury.
And I think that's where, if we're going to talk about trade, I think you have to, for fantasy owners who have Leonard Fournette and he's not producing and some of their other positions aren't producing, I think that's why, while normally I would say wait, don't ever make a rush decision in fantasy football, I think at this point, if you wait until week 8 or week 9 in the fantasy football season, if he's just getting solid minutes and solid touches then, you might actually get less than you get now. I think it's good to test the waters of his market value in your specific fantasy league to see what you could potentially get for him now. Some other fantasy owners might take the gamble, that could be true, that we see Fournette sooner than later and that he comes out in full health. My feeling on it is that I agree with Aaron. I would not take the gamble. He's so hot and cold. He's highly questionable often. I think this injury is actually a lot more serious than they're letting on. I would say cash in now. You'll get the most for him now than you ever will, in my opinion. In the safest way possible, right? You could wait until week 8 when maybe he has a great game, but I think that's too risky. Cash out now. You can get a lot from him now in a safe trade and fill in some spots in your roster that you need secured.
I think it. Oh, go ahead.
I think actually.
I think it depends on your record. If you can, if you're have like if you're 4-1 or something like that, you can afford to. That probably means that you have sufficient depth, at least at running back, to be able to bench Fournette and still win. If that is the case for you, there's no rush to trade Fournette. He'll only be an asset later in the season when there's more bye weeks and there's more injuries. It's a part of it is a matter of patience of how long are you willing to wait to get Fournette back, because when Fournette is back and healthy, he's, in terms of fantasy production, in the top 5 among running backs. He's not in the top 3, but he's in the top 5. If you're 2 and 3, a trade would be something you'd want to consider more. And if you do, you need to get a sufficient, competent running back to fill that void, because it's not a situation where like boom or bust flex designation type players will be able to slot in at running back 2 with your running back 2 moving to running back 1. That's just not enough, especially if you're in a standard league. If you're in PPR, maybe if you get a really heavy pass catching back like James White or something in return, maybe you could get a good deal there. But if you're in a standard league, you gotta hope. Like, I would think a trade somebody might be willing to bite on is someone like Lamar Miller. He's a clear downgrade from Fournette, and he was questionable last week, but he's set to get more playing time. And when he is healthy and when he is getting playing time, he's getting double digits most weeks in standard. Not high double digits. He'll get like 10, 11, 12 points. But I remember last season I had him on my team. He very rarely got single-digit numbers. He got usually between 10 and 13 points every week. And that's good numbers. That's not Fournette numbers, but that's sufficient numbers if you have a losing record and you really need a running back replacement now. But if you don't need it now, keep Fournette on your bench and let it pay off for you later in the season.
Point. Yep.
I think one thing that we're not mentioning is that, well, we probably have mentioned is that the reason the fact that they signed a running back tells us a lot about his injury. The fact is that they think what we will suspect is that it's worse than what we think it is. You don't sign a running back like that if Fournette's going to come back soon. So, yeah, there's definitely something there. It's time for everyone's fourth and long. Predictions around the league are far-fetched, but could happen on any given Sunday. Aaron, we'll start with yours.
Mine, and some may not see this as a fourth and long. Some may see it as being overly optimistic. It kind of goes to show how many different points there are that could be made on it. I think Le'Veon Bell finishes the season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think other teams are willing to take the risk on trading for him, given his contract situation, because regardless of who he ends the season for, he's going to be a free agent at the end of it. I don't think teams are willing to have Le'Veon for 6 games only for him to sign with somebody who offers him slightly more money. I think when he comes back, which is set to be during the Week 7 bye and making his full return first game Week 8, I just don't think any team is going to want to trade for that situation. I think Le'Veon finishes the season with the Steelers. The Steelers continue their tradition of never signing running backs to valuable long-term contracts, and I think he leaves. But I think Le'Veon Bell finishes this season with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
My fourth and long for the week is I believe that Sam Bradford will be the starting quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals again before the end of the season and not due to a Rosen injury. I think Josh Rosen has a lack of arm strength. I think he lacks the ability to be fully aware of the field, while his football acumen and athleticism is great and probably was the best out of the quarterback draft class. He lacks the football intuition that we've seen from Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. He lacks the ability to read a defense like we've seen from Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. And he does not have the arm that can get the ball down the field like we've seen in Josh Allen, that we've seen in Buffalo. I think that Josh Rosen has proven himself as one of the lower draft picks in that draft class. And I think that we potentially see Sam Bradford becoming the starting quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals again before the end of the season. My fourth and short would be that Sam Bradford has to come in and play cleanup for Rosen on a couple games there.
That's fourth and short? Rosen ain't that bad.
I'll give my fourth along now since you guys done. This might be a little controversial, but I don't think it should be, honestly. The Rams would not finish the season with the best record in the NFL. I know right now they're 5-0, and everybody's ran the wave, and everybody wants to hop on the bandwagon, and everybody sees Jared Goff, and the MVP campaign already started for him, and Todd Gurley has like 7 touchdowns already by himself, and he has all these weapons, like Coop and Woods, and etc. I mean, I'm not trying to get into it. The offense stacked. We know that already. But I don't think they're going to be the best team, I guess, if you want to use the record as the measure. I think they're going to eventually start losing games, and that's okay. I mean, that's not the end of the world. But I do not see them finishing as the best team because there is another team out there that I have my eyes on that I think will be the better, but I will not reveal that. Maybe next time for the next podcast I'll reveal that. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, cliffhanger.
Good suspense.
I hope you enjoyed our first episode. We look forward to many more. The information from the podcast can help you take your shot at winning weekly with Thrive Fantasy Football. And thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast.
Have a good week, everybody.
We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.